The morning started like any other aboard station Nexus 7. Coffee brewing in the human quarters, the gentle hum of life support systems, and the soft chatter of 100 different species going about their daily routines. Zara Chen had no idea she was about to become the most wanted human in 3 galactic sectors. "Another beautiful day in paradise," she muttered, stirring synthetic cream into her coffee while gazing out at the swirling nebula beyond the viewport. The sarcasm dripped from her voice like honey from a broken jar. Paradise. Right. More like a glorified space truck stop where every alien species gathered to complain about regulations and trade disputes. Zara worked as a cultural liaison for the Galactic Trade Commission, a fancy title for someone who spent most of her time explaining why humans needed personal space and why touching someone without permission was considered rude. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd chosen a career in diplomacy when her natural instinct was to tell most beings exactly where they could shove their complaints. The comm system crackled to life. Liaison Chun to Conference Room Beta 7. Priority diplomatic incident. She sighed, downing the rest of her coffee in one gulp. The liquid burned her throat, but after 3 years of dealing with galactic bureaucracy, she developed a tolerance for things that hurt going down. Conference Room Beta 7 reeked of tension when she arrived. Ambassador Kellix, a 7-foot-tall Morthan with skin like molten silver, paced behind the curved table. His 4 arms gestured wildly as he spoke in rapid clicks and whistles to his aide. The Morthans were known for their tempers, but Kellix seemed particularly agitated today. The human arrives," Kellix said, switching to Standard Galactic. His voice carried the musical quality typical of his species, but today it sounded more like a funeral dirge. "Perhaps you can explain why your people continue to violate basic social protocols." Zara raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you too, Ambassador. What protocol violation are we discussing today? Did someone shake hands too firmly again? Use eye contact for more than 3 seconds? Breathe too loudly?" The Morthan's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary pair remained fixed on his data pad. "Mock the situation if you wish. Human, your Captain Rodriguez has refused to follow proper quarantine procedures for the 3rd time this cycle." "Captain Rodriguez is transporting medical supplies to Kepler Station," Zara replied, settling into her chair. The furniture automatically adjusted to human proportions, one of the few perks of her job. "People are dying while we debate paperwork. Procedures exist for a reason." Kellix's 4 arms crossed in a complex pattern that indicated extreme displeasure in Morthan body language. "Your species thinks rules don't apply to them. Our species thinks saving lives takes priority over bureaucratic red tape." The words came out sharper than intended, but Zara didn't apologize. She'd had this conversation too many times to count. A new voice cut through the tension. "Perhaps we can find a compromise." Zara turned to see Thex entering the room. The Zephyrian moved with the fluid grace typical of his species, 8 limbs carrying him across the floor like a dance. His translator collar hummed as it converted his native whistle language into Standard Galactic. "Counselor Thex." Kellix acknowledged with a formal nod. "I trust you reviewed the situation?" "Indeed." Thex settled onto his specialized perch, designed to accommodate his unusual physiology. The human captain's actions, while technically in violation of Protocol 77 Alpha, were motivated by humanitarian concerns. Zara felt a flicker of hope. Thex had always been reasonable, one of the few aliens who seemed to understand that humans operated on different principles than most galactic species. "Humanitarian concerns don't excuse lawbreaking," Kellix countered. "If we allow exceptions for humans, every species will demand special treatment." "Oh, bite me," Zara muttered under her breath. The translation collar picked up her words and broadcast them to the room. Kellix's silver skin flushed darker, a sign of growing anger. "Excuse me," he demanded. "I said bite me." Zara stood up, her patience finally snapping. "You want to know why humans ignore your precious protocols? Because half of them are designed to slow down emergency response. While you're filing forms in triplicate, people die." Thex raised one of his limbs in a calming gesture. "Liaison Chun, perhaps we should lower the temperature of this discussion." "The temperature is fine, Counselor. What's not fine is watching bureaucrats play politics while real people suffer." Zara's voice rose with each word. Captain Rodriguez saved 14 lives yesterday. 14. But sure, let's focus on the paperwork he didn't file. Kellix slammed one of his hands on the table. The metal surface rang like a bell. This is exactly the attitude that makes humans impossible to work with. You think your emotional responses justify breaking established law. And you think following rules matters more than doing what's right. The room fell silent, except for the gentle hum of air recyclers. Zara could feel her heart pounding, adrenaline flooding her system. She'd crossed a line, but damned if she cared anymore. Thex's translator collar whistled softly as he processed his thoughts. Perhaps a brief recess would be beneficial. Before anyone could respond, the door chimed. A new figure entered, and Zara's blood ran cold. Vex Morthan, Enforcement Director for the Galactic Trade Commission. The Kralite stood nearly 9 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the room's lights. 6 legs carried him forward with mechanical precision, while his upper limbs remained perfectly still. His species had evolved from predators, and despite millennia of civilization, they still carried themselves like apex hunters. Director Morthan, Kellix said, his anger replaced by obvious nervousness. I was expecting you. Emergency protocols have been activated, Morthan replied. His voice emerged from a Vox unit mounted on his thorax, flat and emotionless. This incident requires immediate resolution. Zara felt ice forming in her stomach. Emergency protocols meant someone important had taken notice. Someone important and angry. What incident, she asked, though part of her already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Morthan's compound eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. The unauthorized entry into Sector 12 by human vessel Mercy's flight. Captain Rodriguez has been detained. Detained? Zara shot to her feet. On what charges? Violation of Quarantine Protocol 77 Alpha, subsection C. Failure to comply with lawful orders from station authority. Endangering public safety through reckless navigation. Morthan rattled off the charges with mechanical precision. The captain faces deportation and permanent ban from galactic space. The words hit Zara like physical blows. Rodriguez had a family, kids who depended on his cargo runs. Deportation would destroy everything he'd built. This is insane, she said. He was delivering medical supplies. The law makes no exceptions based on cargo type, Morthan replied. Kellix's secondary eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Perhaps this will convince other human captains to follow proper procedures. Something snapped inside Zara's chest. The careful diplomatic training. The years of swallowing her anger. The endless parade of aliens who treated human lives like inconvenient statistics. All of it crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. You know what? She said, her voice deadly quiet. Screw this. Screw all of this. She turned toward the door, but Thex blocked her path. His 8 limbs spread wide in what his species considered a calming gesture. Liaison Chun, please reconsider. Leaving now will only make the situation worse. Move, Zara said. I cannot allow you to depart while emotions run so high. Perhaps if we... Thex reached out with one of his upper limbs, intending to place what his species considered a comforting touch on her shoulder. The gesture was meant to be soothing, a common practice in Zephyrian conflict resolution. But Zara Chen had been raised in the gravity wells of Earth. Her reflexes had been honed by 3 billion years of evolution that taught her ancestors to react instantly to sudden movements. When something reached for her unexpectedly, every instinct screamed danger. She spun and struck in one fluid motion. The sound of breaking cartilage filled the room like a gunshot. Thex dropped to the floor, his neck bent at an impossible angle. His translator collar sparked once and went silent. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was Zara's heavy breathing and the distant hum of the station systems. Then Kellix screamed. The Vorthan's musical voice cracked as he stared at Thex's motionless form. His 4 arms shook as he activated his emergency beacon. Security to conference room Beta 7. Medical emergency. Officer down. Morthan hadn't moved from his position, but his compound eyes tracked Zara's every breath. Liaison Chun, he said in that same flat tone, you are under arrest for assault resulting in death of a galactic official. The words seemed to come from very far away. Zara stared at her hands, still feeling the impact of the strike. She'd moved without thinking, pure reflex taking over. On Earth, it would have been a simple defensive maneuver. Here, it had killed someone. She started to say, then stopped. What could she possibly say? That it was an accident? That her Deathworld reflexes had kicked in? That she'd never meant to hurt anyone? The door burst open as security forces flooded in. 12 different species, all armed, all pointing weapons at her. Hands visible. Do not move. Zara raised her hand slowly, her mind still reeling. Thex lay motionless on the floor, his graceful limbs twisted and still. The Zephyrian who'd always been reasonable, who'd tried to find compromises, who'd only wanted to calm the situation. Dead because she couldn't control her temper. Dead because evolution had programmed her to strike first and ask questions later. This will not go unanswered, Kellix whispered, his voice breaking. The Zephyrian Assembly will demand justice. The Council will hear of this. As the security forces surrounded her, Zara realized that everything had changed. The careful balance of human-alien relations, the delicate negotiations that kept Earth in the galactic community, the future of her entire species, all of it now hung in the balance. And it was all her fault. The restraint field activated around her with a low hum, cutting off any chance of movement. Through the transparent energy barrier, she watched as medical teams rushed to examine Thex's body. Their equipment confirmed what everyone already knew. Counselor Thex, respected diplomat and voice of reason, was dead, killed by a human's reflexive violence. As they led her away, Zara caught sight of Morthan speaking rapidly into his communicator. She couldn't hear the words, but she could guess their content. Emergency session, Galactic Council, human threat assessment. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly as they marched her toward the detention center. Other beings stopped to stare, their various forms of communication buzzing with news of the incident. By the time they reached her cell, half the station would know that a human had killed a Zephyrian diplomat. By tomorrow, the entire galaxy would be watching. The cell door sealed with a soft hiss, leaving Zara alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that she just started something that would end very badly for everyone she cared about. #Deathworlder human girl breaks alien neck on Reflex. Galactic Council emergency vote, HFY story. The Reckoning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 18 hours after Thex died. Zara knew this because she'd been counting every minute from her detention cell, watching the news feeds that somehow found their way onto her wall monitor despite security protocols. The headlines scrolled past in a dozen languages she couldn't read, but the images told the story clearly enough. Her face, frozen in that moment of horrified realization. Thex's body being carried away on a medical stretcher. Ambassador Kellix giving interviews with tears streaming down his silver cheeks. Human diplomat kills peaceful mediator. Deathworld violence erupts in sacred council chambers. Is Earth too dangerous for galactic society? That last one made her laugh, though the sound came out more like a sob. Too dangerous. Right. Because every other species in the galaxy had evolved on gentle worlds where the biggest threat was running out of tea and biscuits. The cell door chimed, interrupting her spiral into self-pity. Director Morthan entered, his mechanical footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind him came someone Zara had never seen before, a human woman in Earth Defense Force dress blues. Liaison Chun, Morthan said, this is Admiral Sarah Hayes, Earth's emergency diplomatic representative. The Admiral looked like she'd stepped out of a recruitment poster. Silver hair pulled back in a regulation bun, hard eyes that had seen too much, and a kind of military bearing that suggested she could probably break necks as efficiently as Zara, but with considerably more intention. Counselor, Hayes said, taking the chair across from Zara. Hell of a mess you've made. Admiral. Zara's voice came out as a croak. She hadn't spoken in hours. I suppose you're here to throw me under the transport? Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Actually, I'm here to save your life. And possibly our entire species membership in galactic civilization. Though, honestly, the jury's still out on whether you deserve it. The blunt assessment hit harder than any accusation. Zara had spent the last 18 hours expecting anger, demands for justice, calls for her execution. But disappointment? That cut deeper than she'd thought possible. The Council's debate begins in 2 hours, more than announced. Preliminary vote count suggests 73% support for immediate expulsion of all human colonies from galactic space. Zara felt the blood drain from her face. All colonies? That's 12 million people. 12 million people who share genetic heritage with a killer. Hayes said matter-of-factly, the Zephyrian Assembly is pushing for complete severance of diplomatic ties. The Morthan Confederation wants criminal prosecution under galactic law, and about half the minor species are calling for preemptive military action. Military action? The word stuck in Zara's throat. Hayes leaned back in her chair. Turns out some folks are worried that if one human can accidentally kill a trained diplomat, what might happen if humans decided to get violent on purpose? The irony would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. Humans spent most of their time trying to convince the galaxy they weren't monsters, and Zara had just proved everyone's worst fears correct with one reflexive movement. There has to be something we can do, Zara said. Some way to fix this. Oh, there is, Hayes replied. You're going to testify before the full council. You're going to explain exactly what happened and why. And you're going to hope that enough species believe your story to keep Earth from becoming the galaxy's newest pariah state. Morthan's compound eyes swiveled toward Hayes. The risk of allowing the defendant to speak publicly is significant. If her testimony proves unsatisfactory, it could accelerate the expulsion vote. And if she doesn't speak, the vote passes anyway, Hayes countered. Sometimes you have to roll the dice. Zara stood up, pacing the small confines of her cell. What am I supposed to say? Sorry I killed your friend, but on Earth we have these things called reflexes. That'll go over real well. You're going to tell them the truth, Hayes said firmly. The whole truth, including parts they probably don't want to hear. About Deathworld evolution, about human survival instincts, about why our reactions are different from theirs. The truth, Zara laughed bitterly. The truth is that I lost my temper and killed someone who was trying to help. The truth is that humans are exactly as dangerous as they think we are. Hayes stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who commanded fleets in deep space. The truth, counselor, is that you made a mistake. A terrible, tragic mistake that cost a good being his life. But you know what else is true? Every species in this galaxy has their own version of dangerous. The Krallites hunt in packs and consider mercy a weakness. The Vorthans have berserker rages that last for days. The Silicates can literally melt organic beings with their touch when they're angry. She moved closer to the force field, separating them. The difference is that we're honest about what we are. We don't pretend to be something we're not. Earth didn't hide the fact that as a death world, when we applied for galactic membership, we told them exactly what kind of environment shaped us. Zara felt something shifting inside her chest. Not hope, exactly, but maybe the absence of complete despair. They accepted us anyway, Hayes continued, because they needed what we could offer. Human determination, human creativity, human willingness to take risks that other species won't. But now they're scared, and scared beings make stupid decisions. The transportation to the council chamber took place under heavy guard. Zara found herself in the center of security formation that included representatives from 6 different species, all armed with weapons designed to stop various forms of life. The message was clear. They weren't taking any chances with a dangerous human. The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of engineering, a vast spherical space where representatives from 400 species could gather to debate matters of interstellar importance. Today, it felt like a courtroom where humanity itself was on trial. Zara took her position at the defendant's podium, looking up at tier after tier of alien faces. Some she recognized from diplomatic functions. Others were completely foreign, beings from species so remote that first contact had occurred only decades ago. At the prosecution stand, Ambassador Kellix waited with a team of legal advisors. His silver skin had darkened to the color of old pewter, and his 4 arms remained locked in a posture of mourning. When their eyes met across the chamber, Zara saw no forgiveness there. Council Speaker Axiom called the session to order. The ancient being's crystalline form refracted the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns as it spoke. We gather an emergency session to address the death of Counselor Thex Meridian of the Zephyrian Assembly, killed by human liaison Zara Chen during diplomatic proceedings. The question before this council is whether the human species poses an unacceptable risk to galactic civilization. The words echoed through the chamber with the weight of historical judgment. Zara could feel 400 pairs of eyes, optical sensors, and various other sensory organs focus on her. Liaison Chen, Axiom continued. You stand accused of murder in the first degree under Galactic Code 777. How do you answer? Zara stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the podium. I answer that Counselor Thex is dead, and I killed him, but I am not guilty of murder. A wave of surprised clicks, whistles, and other sounds rippled through the chamber. Several species began speaking at once until Axiom restored order. You admit to the killing but deny guilt? Kellix demanded, rising from his seat. How can you possibly justify such a contradiction? Zara took a deep breath, remembering Hayes' words. Tell the truth. All of it. Because murder requires intent, Ambassador. And I had no intent to harm Counselor Thex. I had no conscious thought at all. What killed him was 3 billion years of evolution that taught my ancestors to react to unexpected contact with immediate defensive action. She turned to address the full chamber. You want to know what humans are? We're the species that survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions, predators with fangs longer than your arm, and natural disasters that could level cities. Our reflexes aren't polite. They're not diplomatic. They're designed to keep us alive when something tries to kill us. Are you suggesting that Counselor Thex pose a threat? A Morthan representative called out. No, Zara replied firmly. I'm explaining why my nervous system interpreted his touch as one. On Earth, if something reaches for you from behind, you assume it's trying to hurt you, because for most of our evolutionary history, that assumption kept our species alive. Kellix's skin flushed darker. So you claim no responsibility? Your violence is simply excused by biology. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zara could feel the chamber's attention focusing on her answer. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future. No, she said quietly. I claim complete responsibility. I chose to lose my temper. I chose to let my anger cloud my judgment. I put myself in a mental state where my training failed and my instincts took over. That choice, that failure of discipline, that's on me. That's human. She paused, looking directly at Kellix. But here's what else is human, Ambassador. When Captain Rodriguez broke your protocols, he did it to save lives. When human colonists settle worlds that other species consider uninhabitable, they do it so those worlds can become productive members of galactic society. When human engineers design systems that other species consider impossible, they do it because someone needs those systems to exist. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Humans are dangerous. We won't apologize for that because it's the source of everything useful we bring to this galaxy. Our willingness to take risks, to push boundaries, to do what others won't or can't. You can't have the benefits without accepting the risks. The chamber fell silent. Zara could hear the soft hum of translation systems and life support, but no voices. 400 species processing her words, weighing them against their fears. Speaker Axiom's crystalline form shifted, refracting light in new patterns. The defendant suggests that human violence and human value are inseparable, that we must accept both or neither. That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Zara replied, because it's the truth. You've seen what happens when other species try to colonize Deathworlds. They fail. When they try to engineer solutions to impossible problems, they give up. When they face threats that require immediate, decisive action, they form committees and debate protocols. She gestured toward the assembled representatives. Humans don't do any of those things. We adapt, we innovate, we act. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes people die because of those mistakes. But sometimes people live because we were willing to take the risk when no one else would. Kellix stood slowly, his forearms moving in formal patterns. Pretty words, human, but they don't bring back Counselor Thex. No, Zara agreed. They don't. Nothing will. And I'll carry that weight for the rest of my life. But kicking humanity out of galactic civilization won't bring him back either. It'll just ensure that the next time there's an impossible problem that needs solving, the species that could solve it won't be there to help. The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Representatives rose to speak for and against the expulsion measure, citing everything from historical precedent to philosophical principles. Zara sat through all of it, watching the political maneuvering that would determine the fate of her species. Some speeches surprised her. The Krallite representative spoke about the necessity of predators in maintaining galactic stability. A Silicate delegate argued that judging species by their most dangerous members set a precedent that could destroy the Council itself. Others were exactly what she expected. Calls for justice, demands for safety, fears about human expansion and aggression. When the final vote was called, Zara closed her eyes and waited. Motion to expel human colonies from galactic civilization fails by a margin of 12 votes. Speaker Axiom announced. The chamber erupted in various forms of noise as 400 species reacted to the news. Zara felt her knees give out, catching herself on the podium as relief flooded through her system. But Axiom wasn't finished. However, the motion to place restrictions on human diplomatic and military personnel passes by a significant margin. All human representatives will undergo mandatory psychological evaluation and enhanced training in interspecies relations. Human military vessels will be required to carry alien observers, and human colonies will submit to regular inspections to ensure compliance with galactic peace protocols. The restrictions were harsh, but not exile. Humanity would remain part of galactic civilization, just under much tighter scrutiny. It wasn't the outcome Zara had hoped for, but it was far better than the alternative. As the session adjourned, she found herself face to face with Kellix one final time. The Morthan skin had returned to its normal silver shade, though his posture remained rigid with barely controlled emotion. "I hope you understand what you've cost us," he said quietly. Thex believed in cooperation between species. He thought beings could overcome their nature through understanding and compassion. "Maybe they can," Zara replied. "Maybe someday we'll evolve past our reflexes, and your people will evolve past your tempers, and the Krallites will evolve past their hunting instincts. But until that day comes, we have to work with what we are." Kellix studied her for a long moment. "The restrictions won't last forever. Eventually, your species will prove itself worthy of full trust again, or you'll confirm every fear we have about Deathworld species." As he walked away, Zara realized he was right. This wasn't an ending, just a reprieve. Humanity would be watching every step they took, every decision they made, every reflex they couldn't control. The weight of that responsibility should have been crushing. Instead, as she walked toward the chamber exit where Admiral Hayes waited with barely concealed relief, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope, because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was proving expectations wrong. They'd done it when they applied for galactic membership from a death world that should have been uninhabitable. They'd done it when they solved engineering problems that other species considered impossible. And they'd do it again, not because they were perfect, but because they were human, dangerous, flawed, stubborn, and absolutely determined to be better than anyone expected them to be. The galaxy would learn to trust them again. It might take decades, but humans were patient when they needed to be. After all, they'd spent 3 billion years learning how to survive. A few more years of proving themselves wouldn't kill them.